in the theme of our discussion, there is a very important correction that we need to make in our understanding of the world, of ourselves, and of our place in the world. In the very beginning of the text of this article of the Mother, she says, life on earth is not a passage or a means. She explains that in most of the ascetic disciplines, they view earth as a field for progress at best. But through the progress, the goal is still to go into some beyond. Because after all, earth is seen as a domain of ignorance or illusion, a trap from which somehow we have to be saved, we have to be liberated, from which we have to escape into some beatitude, some wonderful divine domains beyond, outside, not on the earth. Many religions promise that after your life is over. But in this life they can't promise you anything. But so they've put a condition. In order to enjoy that, you have to do certain things which are useful for the religion or to keep society together, certain moral, ethical values. If you fulfill those properly, if you suffer enough or service the goals of the religion enough, then you'll be rewarded with that heavenly beyond. But the goal is always, either directly or indirectly, an escape into some beyond, which is heavenly. And this is, in contrast, darkness, trap, illusion, suffering. But Mother says, for us the problem is quite different. Life on earth is not a passage or a means. By transformation it must become a goal and a realization. This is a fundamental difference we have to ingrain deeply, because I find inevitably we tend to fall back to the old habit of viewing the world as a trap, viewing the body as a trap. It's so deeply rooted because many of us grew up in it. Even after we have read Sri Aurobindo's writings again and again, those ideas seem somehow to remain at the backdrop or creep in somehow, and we look down in disdain at life or the body or the experiences of life, if nothing else. Oh, these worldly pleasures. Oh, this worldly materialistic life and tendency. Oh, these young people, they're all materialistic. And we look down upon that. And the correction we need to make is to view earth, our body, our place in life as a goal and a realization to be attained here. Yes, the world is still half made. It's a building that's half constructed. If you try to go to a hotel room that's half constructed, well, the bed is going to be coarse, the walls are going to be rough, you will get a few scratches. But then we are here to complete the construction, not to escape from it in abandonment, saying it's half done, therefore it's not good enough, it's wrong. If we take it in this spirit, the whole game of life becomes very different. In the most ancient Vedic text, they described the journey of life as a game, a play. Yeah, you must have fun, you must enjoy it. It's also a battle because you're overcoming difficulties. It's also a journey because where you begin is not where you want to end. You want to end in something much greater, and you have to travel all the way. And in the in-between passage of the ascetic period, in the last 2000 years in particular, all over the world, it's not just in India, it was everywhere, that there was this turning away from life, which is an error, which is a falsehood. And so when we accept life, we accept everything that comes with it, everything without exception, including all our limitations and weaknesses and insufficiencies. But we accept them as a starting point to be overcome, to be developed, to be perfected. And we recognize that deep within everything is still the one same essential divinity which burst out to become the world. Where is the divine? Right here. In every atom, in every cell, in your body, in your heart, in your mind. There's nothing that is not essentially divine. And the whole journey of evolution is nothing but the gradual unfolding and revelation of that essential divinity within us. And so when we say nothing is to be abandoned, and yet the things as they are not sufficient, what's the correction needed? To draw out that essential divinity, to make it more and more overt, to make it more and more explicit. Observe, that's what nature is doing, that's what evolution is doing. It's nothing new, nothing special. It's happening anyway. We are just doing it consciously and speeding up the process. And we call that yoga. Look at a tree. It takes the mud through the roots, reconstitutes the substance, rearranges the molecules, and then becomes this living substance, plant, leaf, fruit, and a beautiful flower. Compare the flower with the mud from which it came. It's still essentially the same atom. Rearranged now, recast to manifest something, to reveal something extraordinary, unbelievable, unimaginable, before the first flower appeared. And when the flower fades, it collapses to become that mud again. It never really changed fully. But momentarily something filled it and bloomed through that mud substance to become flower. When that withdrew, the substance fell back to what it was. But something has changed. When soil has been reconstituted again and again, it becomes more fertile, it becomes more living, it becomes more conscious, it becomes more nourishing. Something has changed. But these repeated infusions of life force and a divine inspiration filling and molding matter is changing matter the slow way. The difference is, in the yoga, our body is identified with our subtle body, our life energies and our mind. Because the three are identified, as we discussed yesterday, our mind can will the body to change. We can will the body to become more conscious, to express through it something beautiful, and change this substance fundamentally, that it does not relapse and can manifest beauty, divinity. And when we look at the whole field of life in this way, everything, every activity is a means for this progressive surging forward to express and manifest more and more harmonious, joyous beauty. And enjoyment of life is an essential part of it. In fact, we would go so far as to say the whole universe was born for the enjoyment. The very first verse of the Isha Upanishad says, all this is for the habitation of the Lord. And Sri Aurobindo explains in his commentary, what do you do with habitation? The universe is born as the house, an expression, the body of the Lord for His habitation. But why do you want to inhabit? For purpose of enjoyment, possession and enjoyment. These are the two key words. And our souls enter in this play, in this multiplicity of so many different individualities, for the purpose of possession and enjoyment. The problem is, you cannot enjoy fully. Inevitably, the moment you enjoy something, it is followed by the opposite reaction. Enjoyment leads to suffering. Oh, the watermelon was so delicious. Did you have plenty of it day before yesterday? Did you suffer the consequences? Did you wake up in the middle of the night? How many times? I wish I hadn't eaten so much, but it was so delicious. I had to eat a little more. Always there's a consequence to enjoyment. Some kind of suffering, something which limits. The same food overeaten gives you a stomach ache or some ill health, etc. We find insufficiency in our capacity to enjoy, but also we experience the opposite, and we do not know how to enjoy pain or suffering. Obviously, that's not meant to be enjoyed, and we don't know what to do with it. And so the correction which the Isha Upanishad teaches in the very first verse, second line, it teaches you the rule of the divine life. In order to enjoy, you must give up the personal attachment, the personal desire, the sense of narrowness and limitation of your first formation that we call the ego sense. And if you can open out your consciousness to participate in the larger totality of the divine enjoyment, then you will find the sufficiency and the completeness of the enjoyment, without the opposite, without the contradictions. And this is the direction in which we are intended to grow. And now we come to this theme. Yesterday we discussed Tapasya of beauty and the whole preparation of the body consciousness and its training. And we come now to the Tapasya of power. Those of you who have read the text will recognize now that I am not following it strictly in the way the mother has described it, because you have read that already. I am trying to supplement it and complement it and elaborate on certain points in a way that is useful for our daily life. In the theme of the Tapasya of Power, Mother takes up precisely this whole business of enjoyment and enthusiasm and participation in life. Because it is in the vital being that we experience enthusiasm and enjoyment. And if somehow, for some reason, if a religion teaches you to kill that enjoyment, you are meant to suffer to be rewarded later, then see what happens. After a while, the enthusiasm shrinks, you become pessimistic, your whole consciousness becomes heavy, you lose interest in life, you become numbed to life. And then you fear enjoyment. Have you seen people who are afraid to enjoy? What a sad life. On the other hand, those young people whom you blame for having a materialistic life, they're not afraid to enjoy. But precisely because of that, sometimes they get into serious trouble. What you need is a culturing, an understanding of what enjoyment is helpful and what enjoyment is detrimental. Not all enjoyment leads to the same outcomes. So the mother speaks here of cultivating this sensitivity. It starts first, she says, by saying that the tapasya of sensations and the tapasya of power are what we are dealing with here in the life energies. For the vital being is the seat of power of effective enthusiasm. And if you don't have that enthusiasm, nothing will work. Even your mind cannot pursue something if you do not enjoy it and have the enthusiasm of the vital participating. And the journey of yoga is impossible if the vital is not participating and enjoying the journey. So, this is so important for every activity of life. And she says, it is in the vital that thought is transformed into will and becomes a dynamism for action. Do you see people who have great ideas but are not able to translate them into action? One of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the major reasons for most of them is because they're afraid of enjoying the action. They're afraid of the sway that the vital has when you enter into the enjoyment of the action, and they're afraid of being trapped by it. So they pull back. And when they pull back, the vital is weak, not interested, and they don't have the energy to do what they want to do. And it's a serious problem for the ascetic types. On the other hand, those who get into the sway of the enjoyment, they have all the energy they want, but they are a slave of their energy. They are the slave of their instinct. They are carried away by the very impulse that carries them. And they don't have control. They always overdo. It is also true that the vital is the seat of desires and passions, of violent impulses and equally violent reactions of revolt and depression. And this is the thing we fear when we fear to identify with the enjoyment and the dynamism. We fear that we'll get swayed by those very tendencies of passion. You will see there are people who enjoy those passions. Life becomes boring if you don't have something very passionate and exciting to feel. So they will create a problem so that they can feel something exciting. Have you met people who want to nitpick and engage you in a quarrel? Just to get a response out of you, because they want to interact with you and you're just closed. So they will engage with you to create a quarrel, and then they somehow have the satisfaction of the interchange of energies. What's the correction? Because you swing on the one side, revolt, depression, exaggerations of two extremes. She says the normal remedy is to strangle and starve the vital by depriving it of all sensation. And this is very important to understand, because we have to understand what's wrongly done, and so we can understand what's the right thing to do. Depriving it of all sensation is the way by which you starve the vital. What's the connection between sensation and the enthusiasm and life energies? She says, sensations are indeed its main sustenance, and without them it falls asleep, grows sluggish, and starves to death. This is an extraordinary insight. You have here the key of how to nourish the vital, or how to strangle it. Sensations. Physical sensations. There are emotional sensations and there are thought sensations, but mostly it is in the range of the physical sensation and emotional sensations that we find the nourishment that the vital receives. Any kind of sensation. Look what happens to a young person when he's bored. What does he feel like doing instinctively? Let's go and do something exciting. What's exciting may vary from person to person, but you want something exciting. And what's the nature of the exciting activity? Some novelty of sensations. Pictures, sounds, touch, or you're riding a, what's that? Roller coaster. And something triggers sensations which are new, which you have not had before. If you go to the same roller coaster 10 times, after a while you say, oh, been there, done that. Not interesting anymore, because the novelty is gone. Now I want something else which I have not experienced, and the novelty of that sensation gives me the rush, the high, the enthusiasm, the energy, the excitement. And through this, the vital grows. The opposite, of course, is true. If you're sitting at home, sitting at the computer, staring at the screen, your fingers moving, you don't get too much sensation, unless you're watching a movie, but mostly you're too busy with your work, and after a while the vital becomes, it falls asleep, grows sluggish, starves to death. And then somebody pulls you out, come on, breathe fresh air, get out into nature. Oh yeah, what's nature? I forgot. And then you get a little bit of the nature and you can feel immediately you're becoming more fresh, more clear-headed, you have fresh energy, and now you can go back and do the work better. So we recognize even if our work requires us to be in a kind of a sensory isolation, we must refill, and the best way to refill is contact with nature. If you do not have contact with nature directly, then get the closest that you can. If nothing else, go up on the terrace and breathe fresh air. And we'll see other ways shortly. Now, Mother discusses 3 sources of subsistence. The vital has 3 sources of subsistence, but all of them involve sensation as main sustenance. Okay? So we'll see now the 3, and we will learn to tap into all 3. The one most easily accessible to it comes from below, from the physical energies through the sensations. And this is easiest to do. How do you do that? Well, you just had a nice, exciting exposure and get a burst of energy. Food is the other one. And food also, if it's boring, flat, tasteless, is not so interesting. When the food has bright colors, bright smells, bright tastes, everything is more enjoyable, more interesting, more diverse. You have the enthusiasm of eating more. You end up eating more inevitably when it's good food, right? You see how in certain traditions, which are very ascetic, they don't want that. Remember, they want to kill the vital, so they make the food as flat and bland as possible. In certain ascetic traditions in India, I'm sure they would have equivalents in Europe also, they had to go begging from house to house. They could never ask for anything specific. If somebody gave, you took. If they don't give, you don't take. What they give, you have no choice of preference. You take it all together and mash it up into one common paste to flatten the taste as far as possible, so that you don't enjoy. Because enjoyment is a trap, remember? And we're taking a very different approach. So we recognize that there is this access to energy from below, physical sensations, There are other activities which also create sensations. Food, and we associate also with that sex. These are two instincts which are very deeply rooted, almost as because they're survival instincts, species survival instincts. But both of them carry some sense of enjoyment. Both have an addictive tendency, but they both give a rush of energy when you enjoy it. And we recognize the place for these things. The second source of sustenance is on its own plane, on the level of the vital, when it is sufficiently vast and receptive by contact with the universal vital forces. Now there are two things here. First, the vital itself must become wider and more receptive to be able to access this energy. And then the source of the energy, which is the universal vital forces. You can train yourself for this. We do this instinctively during sleep. I mentioned yesterday how the subtle body briefly disengages from the gross physical. It's slight separation often, sometimes a few inches, sometimes more. But during that separation, the vital body opens out and draws universal life force from the environment. With it, it also tends to pick up a lot of junk of the environment, which colors your dreams. I once was in LA for some program, Los Angeles, and somebody wanted to do a TV interview. So they put me up in a hotel very close to the TV studio. It was downtown LA. It was one of the worst nights I had. And then later people told me, well, that's the nature of that area. I didn't know it at the time. But inevitably, because you're unconscious, you just absorb whatever is there, and that becomes the stuff of your dreams, and sometimes the stuff of the quality of energy when you wake up in the morning. So it's useful if you purify the space before you go to sleep, or connect consciously to a higher grade of vibration, bypassing the current lower grades. So before sleeping, you read something uplifting, you think of beautiful thoughts, feel, remember, visualize beautiful scenes, a place that you find particularly nourishing, even if it's far away. For the vital, it makes no difference. Whatever for you is sacred and uplifting, that's a good thing to visualize. Visualize yourself there, and then go to sleep in that visualization, in that state, in that connection, and then in the night, throughout the night, you will be drawing nourishment from there. Very simple, but having a profound impact. But you can, right here sitting without needing to sleep, draw on that life force also. And there's a process by which you can develop that capacity. Some people do it instinctively. There are people who seem to have enormous amount of vitality. They can walk into the room and do all kinds of activities. At the end of the day, they still have plenty. And you're busy trying to keep up. The mother, at the age of 80, beyond 80, was working through late into the night, and certain days the work was so much, she would look at the watch and say, oh, it's already 4 o'clock, let's start the next day. No sleep. And with full of energy. She's meeting person after person. Each one finds her fully fresh, fully engaged, with full enthusiasm and involvement. Well, she had developed that capacity to draw. But the capacity itself is not a big deal. All of us can do it. You see our new Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He has this capacity. He is able to meet hundreds of people through the whole day, and still he is full of energy. And still his handshake is so strong. When he was in America, he met President Obama. And when they shook hands, Obama came away with a comment saying, my God, this man has been meeting so many people, and after that his energy level is so high. There must be something to this thing called yoga. It came in the newspapers, you must have seen. And yes, that was the way by which he has developed it. And you can develop it that way also. And that way is the practice of pranayama. You are being given some training in that. Asanas as a foundation will plastify your body and make it capable of holding more energy. Now this is a critical component. You can draw enormous amount of energy, but if your body can't hold it, it will destabilize your nerves. And that creates its own problems. You'll find yourself getting unstable emotionally sometimes because you can't contain. The energy will tend to burst out. So the asanas form a foundation. Do that if you do the pranayama. Don't do just the pranayama. And then the pranayama opens you through the breathing exercises to absorbing life energy. But again, there's a distinction in gradations of life energy. You can absorb the coarse life energy which is around you anyway, or you can tune into something higher, and that's where your intention and visualization will help. But the process of pranayama, notice what it does. Breathe in and breathe out, and then hold and contain, holding the breath, especially leaving out consciously, breathing it consciously. The whole process being made conscious, you'll find there's a point where the in and out breath merge. The air outside and the air inside become connected consciously. And that's when the thing begins to happen. Now you could bypass the specific exercise of pranayama and achieve the same thing by a kind of visualization. And it's simply becoming aware of the outline of your awareness. You can feel what I mean. You'll feel the surface of your skin, that's your form of your body, but there's an outline of awareness extending beyond the body, and you can feel a limit which you call your personal space. Just become aware of that outline. Do it right now. And once you've become aware of that, and you can do it with eyes open also, or eyes closed, whichever is easier for you to feel. Now become aware of what's outside that outline. And what's outside extends infinitely in all directions. The whole universe is an ocean of energy, of which your personal space is a tiny bubble. And you are now aware of the skin that separates that huge energy outside from the little energy inside, your little bubble of personal energy. And now when you breathe in, draw energy from that enormous universal ocean into your little bubble from all directions, as if your bubble has become porous. And you breathe in from all directions, absorbing that universal energy. And when you breathe out the little stale personal energy within your bubble, push it out through the pores into the universe. Breathe in through the porous bubble, fresh energy. Breathe out through the porous bubble, all the stale energy. Notice your attention is not on your physical breath and your lungs, it is on the porous outline of your personal bubble of awareness. That's where you're breathing. And now perhaps gradually you may even want to dissolve that bubble, let that bubble, the outline of the bubble thin out and even fade out completely, so that your inner energy space and outer energy space are linked. And the energy flows freely through. And just that, you can open your eyes and you notice a shift in your energy internally and the energy around you. More fresh, more intense, more bright. And you can do this with eyes open in the middle of an activity. Just become aware, thin out the bubble, draw in fresh energy with a few conscious breaths, or after a while you can drop the physical breathing and just draw energy directly as you become more familiar with the sensation. What you have learned is basically to tap directly into the universal life force. And the skill of tapping into it, of course, will grow, and then you'll be able to distinguish between gradations of density of that energy. And when you're able to do that, even as you expend energy on one side, you can draw energy on the other side, and you will have access to infinite energy potentially. It's only your capacity to contain and channel the energy which is limited. And that can only grow gradually. That takes time. But this skill to draw in, you can learn very quickly, as we have already experienced. So this is the second source of vital subsistence on its own plane when it is sufficiently vast and receptive by contact with the universal vital forces. Now sometimes you'll find this easy when you're in a forest space, lots of plants around you, lots of flowers. It's easy to draw from the trees. Mother suggests an exercise also of leaning with your back against the trunk of a tree and drawing energy or allowing the energy to soak into your body. Particularly, it gives access to a grade of energy which is very close to the physical. And it is very good for regeneration of the nerves, bringing stillness and regeneration in the nerves. And from there, of course, all the rest benefits. The third source of subsistence for the vital, the third, to which it usually opens only in a great aspiration for progress, comes to it from above, by the infusion and absorption of spiritual forces and inspiration. Now, we've all experienced this sometimes when, as a result of a very special experience in meditation or just while reading, there's a special descent and a flatus, and you feel so full of fresh, uplifting, bright energy. We've all had this experience one time or the other, more or less, but we've all had it. That's what she's referring to. But she says it happens only, usually, in a great aspiration for progress. And this happens, you have to do something which you know is on the edge of your capacity. I have to make this presentation, I have an exam, I have this work to finish which is so important, so demanding. And you make an intense prayer, a call. And as if in response to that prayer and call, there is this descent which fills you and you are carried through the work. We've all experienced that also. But you can make it happen consciously, whenever you need, at will, and eventually perhaps in all activities. And you could develop similarly, just as we developed the skill of drawing from the universal life force, learn to rely on this higher energy source more and more. And the mother observes that the vitality which comes from the spiritual source above is of a much finer grade. And it is more nourishing to these higher parts than the vitality we draw from the universal life force, which is of a denser, coarser grade. But for the body, the coarser is useful, especially if it has been refined to some extent through the trees. But for the higher parts of the mind especially, it is this higher descending energy which is more precious. So you see three sources. The most material, physical, down below us, literally. It's coming from the trees, the plants, the roots below us. From the region around us, which is universal vitality, life energy, with a few gradations in between. And then above us, from the spiritual energy. And it can replace the vital life force with more effectivity because it is a free, conscious energy. And this also we can train by persistently calling upon it, relying on it more and more. So these are three sources that she is describing. And then to these, she says, to these sources men always strive more or less to add another, which is for them at the same time the source of most of their torments and misfortunes. There's one more source which is coming from a different type. Remember, you could draw from the trees? Well, you can draw from human beings also. But there's a price to pay. The source of torments and misfortune. And she says, you see how she has worded it. It is so extraordinary. You'll see the many aspects to this. It is the interchange of vital forces with their fellows. Usually in groups of two, which they often mistake for love. But which is only the attraction between two forces that take pleasure in mutual interchange. There's straight away three categories of this experience she's referring to. And the vocabulary is so universal, it'll apply to every situation. The first is with their fellows. Notice what happens when you go to a party. You're moving around, mixing with people. You come back and notice the change that takes place in you. Have you ever had this experience that after a while in a party you start feeling suffocated and you want to step out for fresh air, be alone? What is it from? What makes you feel suffocated? And it's not fresh air inside. It's something else. The quality of the energies that you're soaking in unconsciously can become suffocating because your energies are so different and they overwhelm you after a while. But if you go with like-minded people, sometimes it's not so suffocating. But still you say, at some point, enough, I'm full, I can't take more. And then what do you do after that? You need to be alone, as if to shed off the mixture that came in and recover yourself. But often it does not happen overnight. It takes a day or two sometimes. If you're conscious, even while you're sitting in that space, you have no actual interactions going on consciously, but everybody is on their own tables, after a while you can feel the energy soaking into you. And when it begins to soak in, you'll notice your thoughts change, your emotions change. And then as if you get sucked into the group behavior, the crowd psychology kicks in. You laugh with everybody. And things which you would not have laughed perhaps. And that's the basis of crowd psychology. The whole group gets filled with one common energy, and now the political leader, the skillful political leader, taps into that common energy and plays with that common energy, and the whole group shakes. If he pulls at the common energy, the whole group gets excited together. The whole group laughs together. The whole group cries together. And that's how they wield the crowd. There was mention yesterday of Devan Nair, former president of Singapore, who had met the mother. He shared with me something very interesting. He said his spiritual opening began like this. He was a brilliant orator, extraordinary crowd control. And he says, I was in this massive crowd and I was playing the crowd, enjoying it fully, wielding it as skillfully as he always did. And then suddenly, he says, it was as if a voice from above told him. A voice spoke, not as if. He heard a voice speak. You really are enjoying this, aren't you? And the shock of that voice speaking, and obviously something else came with it, it threw him back in consciousness. And he observed himself and this whole interaction with the crowd. And he began to wonder, is this what I really want? And immediately the whole thing fell. And afterwards his colleagues told him, what happened there? You had the whole crowd eating out of your hand and then suddenly you switched off. What happened there? And he said that's when he began to question himself, his life, his purpose, etc. And that began a different journey. This skill is there among some people, they become natural leaders. But this is what happens when you get sucked into the crowd, you're no more yourself. Your thoughts and feelings are a reflection of the group consciousness, which has its own identity. And you can disengage. That's when you feel suffocated. When you feel overwhelmed, your individuality is as if buried in this group individuality, group consciousness. But the same thing happens in a smaller group. And then she gives the second example, groups of two. That's still a group. You spend time with one person long enough, after a while you need a break. And what do you do? What do you do? Either you try to be alone or you try to be with somebody of a very different type of energy. Now often you see this happening. There's a psychology to this. Couples, men and women, have been together. They live together. They're 24 hours almost together. When they meet, the men link up, the women link up. The men have had enough of being with the wife has had enough of being with the husband, now they engage with a different type of energy. And there's this whole engagement that takes place there, after which now they can come back refreshed energetically. The masculine energy has lost so much, it needs to regenerate by engagement with another masculine energy. And now it's fresh again to re-engage with the feminine energy, with something new, something different again. Otherwise there's a mixture that's taking place between the two, where one's energy leaks into the other, eventually you absorb each other's energies until it flattens out. The distinction is not so strong. You're almost like one person, and then you get fed up with that. There's no novelty left. After having re-engaged with your own gender, you come back, again the novelty returns because the difference of energy is strong. Now these things you can feel in yourself, but you can see it in others. When people have had a very strong engagement of energy, especially when they have a strong romantic engagement or a physical intercourse, you can see their energy has shifted and the energies are mixed. You can see it in the aura, even the outline of the aura is as if broken. It's a very interesting thing that takes place when two people come together like this physically. The bubble of the aura, which is you felt just now, that breaks. And the auras join and the energies merge. There's a huge amount of exchange taking place in the vital energy. especially in the layers of the vital which engage with the subconscious. And this is the reason why after such an engagement you will find you pick up the other person's habits. You begin sometimes to express similar thoughts or similar vocabulary. And typically, if I were a counselor, a psychiatrist, doctor, whatever, and a person came to me in that state, one could sense that there's somebody else's energy mixed into them. And whatever engagement you have with them will not be accurate because of that mixture. And typically it takes 2 to 3 days for the mixture to wear off. And then you can see the person for what they are and the bubble has reformed and you can deal with the individual as they are. I'm placing these examples before you so you understand how much mixture takes place and we are totally unconscious of it. But we are aware actually at a subliminal level, we sense it, we just don't articulate it in our conscious awareness mostly. But when I say it to you like this, you can probably go back to your own experience and say, oh yeah, that makes sense, that's what I felt. Become conscious. And when you become conscious, you can deal with it. When you're conscious of an energy entering you, you can choose to accept or refuse. You can choose to modify it even. It's not always negative. The good people, I'm interacting with a good person, but the quality of energy is completely different. And I can choose how much I allow or not. What level I allow. And this is something again very interesting. There's a gross physical level and you will feel that energy generally at a level below the waist in your aura. There's a level which is more sentimental, emotional, rising up to a higher vital, which you will feel in this range in your whole aura around you. And there's a level which is more mental, which is from the shoulder up, quality of energy, which you will feel in your aura in this space. And if you're conscious on that level, you can, so to say, put a block and allow the engagement on other levels. And it's very effective. Just becoming conscious and willing it, you're able to modify. And then when you walk into a crowd, there's this huge inrush of energies, especially if you're very different. If you've just come back from a deep concentration or meditation, you walk into a general crowd in a market, the difference is so much there will be an extra pressure coming on you. You can notice it, but you can also prevent it. Or kind of navigate in the crowd through spaces where the energy is less coarse. On the other hand, if you're depressed, you're lonely, you're pessimistic, you're at a level below the average, walk into a crowd, mix in the marketplace, and you'll find yourself uplifted very quickly. Because that huge inrush lifts you, it is on a higher grade of energy than you were at. And you come back bright, positive, cheerful. But eventually you have to deal with the problem in the long run. These are just interesting observations. The same principle applies to a spiritual space. You enter the spiritual space and you can feel the presence. And generally you will notice you will feel it as something pressing from above. You'll rarely feel it coming up from below. Because it's in these higher ranges above the head that you feel the pressure. You feel a pressure on the head sometimes. Or you just feel something settling, a peace settling in you, a brightness, lightness, freeing you. You feel as if you're floating, and so on. You can consciously tune in into that and allow only that and filter out the rest. These are all skills you will develop once you become aware that this is possible and that you have the sensitivity. So now, what do we do with this whole business of sensations? Now we have a broad picture. This is how it happens. These are the kinds of interchanges, exchanges possible. They happen. What do you do with it? And I'm going to read the whole paragraph, which you've already read, but just to see, because she says it so beautifully and accurately and precisely. Thus, if we do not wish to starve our vital, sensations must not be rejected or diminished in number and intensity. What she's saying, don't withdraw, continue exactly what you're doing, maybe even increase if needed. But neither should we avoid them. Rather, we must make use of them with wisdom and discernment. And this is really the correction required. Sensations are an excellent instrument of knowledge and education, but to make them serve these ends, they must not be used egoistically for the sake of enjoyment in a blind and ignorant search for pleasure and self-satisfaction. So later she says, we have to develop more and more the power of discerning the quality, origin and effect of the various vital vibrations in order to know whether they are favorable or not. Quality, origin and effect. I've had an interesting incident which was narrated to me when I was working with teachers in Bombay. So one of the teachers came to me and I was discussing with them how to inculcate the sensitivity in the younger generation so that they can choose better in a world where everything is being thrown on them, the worst and the best. So this teacher came and said, I have a daughter and she was under peer pressure to go to discotheques, Bombay, rich family. And so she said, luckily I had raised her to develop sensitivity, and one day when she was of age, I said, all right, I will take you to the discotheque. So no problem, you don't have to hide, you don't have to fear your parents, I will take you. She took her to a good one and said, now you're free to do what you like, I'll be sitting in my corner having my nimbu pani, lemon water, and you can have what you like. She gave her money and said, you do what you want. And she said, after 15 minutes, the girl came back and said, Mommy, this place stinks, it's noisy, let's go somewhere better. But this was possible because she had been brought up in a climate where the sensitivity had been cultivated. Now she had an experience and she said, well, it's not worth it, I have better experiences I'd rather spend my time in. But you must have had better experiences to begin with, right? And you must be able to distinguish the difference between the two. So, the key words here, Mother puts, are quality, then the origin. Where did this come from? I'm feeling this weird sensation. I don't know, I'm feeling a little low today. Where did it come from? And I look back, it started after I met such and such a person. It started after I had that session of discussion with people where I was gossiping. And I feel my whole energy go low. It started after I was sitting in that particular location. I picked up something from there. There are places, you'll notice, when you walk into nature, open space, and I ask you to find a place and sit down, you will look around and naturally tend to go and sit at a particular location. If I ask you to shift to another place, you'll say, no, I don't feel comfortable there. You can go into a room where there are many chairs. It's not so easy there. A room where different activities take place. And then you will feel the difference. Somewhere you feel comfortable, somewhere you don't feel comfortable. There are chairs in an airport where somebody has just sat and got up. And if you sit there, you can feel the person who sat there before. And it hits you sometimes if the vibes are really different. Just become conscious of what's the origin of this feeling, this vibe, this sensation, this energy. And third is the effect it has on you. Now, on one level we say, okay, I have a dullness in my head. But that's not enough. Just notice how it changes your thoughts, changes your feelings, changes your values. While we are here, during this period of 4.5 days, you'll find your thoughts turn in a different way. You go back home and you'll find your thoughts change to a different direction. Just the habit of the space. Perhaps within your house, when you sit in the space where you sit for prayer or meditation every day, you sit there and your thoughts change. You go to another place and your thoughts change. And this is the reason why we take care to preserve the vibes of a space, especially when it comes to spiritual things. It's useful to keep a space in your house which you keep exclusively for holding a spiritual charge. Because the space now holds it. Later, even if you don't feel it, you come back into the space, it comes on you. There are some traditions, in occult traditions, they even store the spiritual energy in an object. This is the basis for a whole lot of symbolic stories and fairy tales where, somebody stole that gem and so the fellow died and stuff like that. But you can actually do that. You can transfer energy into an object or draw back energy from it. This is what the mother did when she gave you a blessing packet. Now certain objects can hold energy for a long time, some don't. And it dissipates. With the blessing packets, mother actually said after a year you can leave it because the energy is generally dissipated unless it is recharged. And you can recharge it. Place it before the mother, invoke her to recharge it. It's not much more difficult. But if you can charge a blessing packet, you can charge your own body. That's your blessing packet, that's your temple, remember? Your body can hold all the ranges of consciousness. It is one thing in the whole universe which can hold all the ranges of consciousness. But what will you fill it with? Think of the body as a container. We had a beautiful image yesterday in the lecture in the evening from Kabir. There was this doha which went that the water is from the same well. We're all jugs of different shapes and sizes, but the water is the same. Yes, but we can have different kinds of water also, different grades of energy. The spiritual essence is of course the same, but taking the symbolism on different levels, you can see how you can choose what kind of water you fill in, pure water or mixed water. And you can purify your thoughts, purify your energies, purify your sensations, refine them and build this intensity within you. That is tapas. And when that intensity grows enough, it radiates around you. It changes your circumstances. It changes the engagement with universal energies coming to you, and so it changes the outcomes of your activities and changes your fate. We come to a very profound insight here. The fate of your circumstances is the outcome of the state of consciousness and energies that you hold within you. Mother once explained that fate is on many levels. Depending on which consciousness you live in, that's the direction it will tend to go to. And you can shift levels. And that means this container, your body and the space around you, your personal space, your aura, must be cultivated and the energy and consciousness within it refined and raised and made more conscious, and so on. So observe the effect, quality, origin and effect of various vital vibrations to know whether they are favorable. Favorable for what? To harmony, beauty and good health. Straight, very simple. Then you make a choice. Is this favorable? If it's not, or whether they are harmful to the balance and progress of the physical being and the vital. So, the goal here, she says, is enlightening, strengthening and purifying the vital and not weakening it. And that's how one can contribute to the true progress of the being. And she compares it with food, something we discussed yesterday. Just as the choice of food has a different effect on the body, the choice of sensations and the influx of life energies has a change on your vital nature. If you mix with people who are pessimistic, you will get infected with their pessimism. If you mix with people who are idealistic and optimistic, you will get infected with their idealism and optimism. Choose your friends wisely. There's very interesting research now to show something more. If you mix with people who are overweight, you will tend to put on weight. I didn't say it. Of course, they don't know why. They think it may be because you follow their eating habits, but it's not true. You may spend time with them and come home and eat, still you'll have the same effect. Because the increase or reduction of weight is not just a question of food, it's a question of state of energy. I'm going to touch upon something which is very deep here. The way your body feels to yourself energetically determines the form and content of your body. The physical body is a reflection of your subtle physical, which is a reflection of your life, energy and mind. If you feel ample, if you feel comfortable in amplitude, fullness of size, you will tend to put on weight. Because that's your comfort level of energy. And this is the reason why many people who have huge amount of energy tend to put on weight. It's a fact. You will notice this in people who have more energy, that they will always tend to do that. Mother, in fact, has a joke about somebody she met in Japan who had this theory that all energy comes from the belly. And so to have a large belly is a source of lots of energy. And anyone who has lots of energy will have a large belly. So then Mother says, I pointed out, it was I think Rabindranath Tagore, she said, he doesn't have a large belly. And the man said, just you watch, he will get one soon. Joke aside, but there's a truth to it. How you feel in the energy of your body changes the physical shape eventually. And you can actually modify that. For which, of course, you must become conscious of it. But the point here is, this is your nourishment. The sensations and the energies you take in are nourishment for your vital body. And through that, your enthusiasm for life, your enjoyment of life, and through that, your ability to actualize your dreams and ideals and thoughts. Because that's the dynamizer, remember, and the will. And through that, the health of your physical body. Because when your energy is weak from pessimism, the body becomes weak. So it's like the fulcrum, the key for everything to be effective in life. If you're not looking for effectivity, you don't need the vital. Then you can sit back at your table, dream of beautiful things, be sickly, it doesn't matter. But for effectivity, you must have a strong, healthy, organized, refined vital. So, the choice of sensations and their control should be made with a very scientific austerity and solely for the growth and perfection of the vital, of this highly dynamic instrument. These are her words. It is by educating the vital, by making it more refined, more sensitive, more subtle, and one should almost say more elegant, in the best sense of the word, that one can overcome its violence and brutality, which are in fact a form of crudity and ignorance, of lack of taste. So, refined, sensitive, subtle, elegant. That's the direction in which we have to cultivate our vital energies. And she says, when it's so cultivated, the illumined vital can be as noble and heroic and disinterested as it is now spontaneously vulgar, egoistic and perverted. And it's not difficult to do this. It's just a question of methodical practice, and you will begin to see results very quickly. So this is, in brief, the theme of the Tapasya of Power. And you see here, power is a word which we have not so far mentioned too much, but it is a natural character of the vital, of the life energies. When the vitality is stronger, you have power. When the vitality is active, you have a dynamic power. When the vitality is still, you have a static power, but it is still power, which influences circumstances. And often the static power can have a much wider influence because it is an unseen influence than the dynamic power to which you can have an opposition and a resistance. Static power you cannot oppose because you see nothing, nothing is moving. How do you oppose something that's not moving? Yes?
Can you elaborate? What do you mean by static power?
Okay, static power is what happens when somebody walks into the room and you perk up. He didn't do anything, he didn't say anything, he changed you by his presence. Right? You saw this happen in India recently when Narendra Modi became Prime Minister. Overnight, everything began to change. And he didn't do a thing about it. Just the fact that he was there, and then he spoke of certain ideals, set certain directions, although he had done nothing about it still. And immediately it started a process of change. And I'm sure even here you would have felt that change. That is extraordinary static power. So it can mean two things. One is that your primary source of energy is more mental. Okay. So the question was that he said he feels the energy much more in the head, and the primary drive comes from the energy which is felt in the head. So I said it can mean two things. One is either that your primary source of energy is more in the head. That means when you act, you are driving yourself by a mental will more than a vital enthusiasm involvement. You see the difference?
Does it need to be changed? Or
hang on, I'll come to that shortly. Does it need to be changed? I'll come to that. But you notice first, if this is true, or it means that you're only sensitive to the energies on this level, you're not so sensitive below. But in this case, it seems to me, and this is the case with many people who are more intellectually oriented, that the drive of the will is more from the mind, which forces the vital, which forces the body, and you do things. And of course, it's tiring to the mind after a while. And often you experience rebellion from your own vital energies. I don't feel like doing, I hate doing this, but I'm going to force myself to do it. And who's forcing whom? The mind is forcing the vital. But if somehow the vital energies could be transmuted and this instinctive hate or dislike for certain activities could be changed and the vital taught to enjoy in the right way, then you will find you don't have to fight yourself. Oh, here's an activity, I'm not particularly enthused about it, but okay, it's come, let's do it. You've seen people who do like that. They are in it, they enjoy, even though it's not something particularly likable, but that once they take responsibility for it, they will enjoy it. And they are not struggling internally, they're not fighting, and there's not the exhaustion of the mind struggling against the vital. This is the case with many people who are more centered in the mind and have not worked to refine or train the vital. And I can say I've been through the same difficulties, so I understand this very well. But then when the energies flow in the vital, you would feel them engaging. If you don't feel them, then your vital is not fully participating and still mental energy driving. Okay? That's what I mean by difficulty. Because at some point in life, if you want to be effective, you have to bring the vitals engagement into it. And what happens initially, because we have not trained that capacity, we are afraid to release the vital. It becomes too much, too intense, too difficult to manage. And so we have to do it bit by bit. Allow a little bit of enthusiasm, enjoying, then refine the enjoyment and so on, experimenting briefly as you go along. It will allow eventually a wholehearted participation where your whole being, mind, vital, physical, can be into it fully, completely involved. It's a great gift when you can do that. The question is from the discussion on healing yesterday on autoimmune diseases and allergies, which are now becoming more frequent. With allergies, there are two sides to it. One may be a physical cause, the other would be a psychological cause. And some of the physical causes, at least, are coming through the increased use of poisons in the food, pesticides and other poisons, but also from some of the genetic modifications to the food. Now, everyone puts GMO in bad light entirely, but I would say GMO is a technology. You can use it wisely or misuse it. In the way much of the GMO modifications are done today, they are used with very narrow, short-term objectives. For example, they will try to thicken the peel of the banana or the papaya, the fruit, because it's better for transport and storage. In the process, they kill the taste, they kill the nourishment. And so in the long run, you're losing something much more valuable. On the other hand, in order to strengthen the peel, what they did was they took rabbit skin gene and inserted that into the fruit, and that's creating a mix which the body does not recognize as healthy and tries to throw out. Or the mechanism of introduction of the gene involves introducing a virus which carries the gene into the cell, and the virus remains as an imprint into the new gene. The viral gene the body recognizes as an illness and tries to expel. So a lot of these reactions come from these poisons, toxins and unhealthy genetic modifications. But the psychological cause, and that goes back to the first thing which you mentioned, autoimmune diseases. The psychological cause is tied to the autoimmune disease problem, where, remember, the whole body imprint is eventually a reflection of your energy body. So your thoughts, your feelings, which have also locations in your aura, tend to accumulate and form or modify results in the gross body processes. So if you have strong thoughts of fear, strong sensations of fear, where do you feel the fear? It hits you in the stomach, right? Strong feelings of hatred hits you in the stomach. Pessimism creates a bitterness here in this passage of the esophagus. So eventually in the aura they accumulate there as a habit, modifying the physical processes there on that level, because the physical processes depend on the energy which is in the subtle physical and subtle body. And then that forms into a habit, a knot, which becomes the disease. So all disease eventually finds its origin in a psychological cause leading to a biological result, except where it comes from outside, but even there the psychological causes. But the immunity to outside invasions is also dependent on the energy state within you. So autoimmune diseases represent some part of the personality that is as if that needs to be pushed out. And generally it comes most often from some form of self-hate. There's something in me that I don't like. I'm not even conscious about it. I hate the fact that I get upset every time someone speaks to me in this way. I hate the fact that I'm unable to do what I want to do. I feel stifled, I feel suffocated, and I'm unable, I feel impotent. I hate the fact that whatever it is, something you hate in yourself, it could be your handwriting which you don't like, because somebody drilled it into you that it's really bad, it's worthy of hate. But the hate has got into you and it's taken a form of self-hate. It may be a narrow knot, but that, depending on the level on which it kicks in, gets lodged in a biological process and becomes a kind of a reaction to oneself. So it starts by correcting on a psychological level, beginning to accept. Accept yourself for what you are. My mind, my emotions, my body, my habits, my nature, my character. Well, that's how it is. And then give it love and compassion. All right, this is the instrument given to me. This body is the instrument given to me. I must love my body. This personality is something so precious. It's a gift to be on earth and to have this capacity to express. And I have so many beautiful capacities, gifts, and with it comes other bundle of other habits, some of them inherited, some of them from the environment, some of them from past habits, whatever. I accept, I embrace, I love it. And then with that compassion and love, I begin to work upon it bit by bit. When you make this correction of accepting and absorbing without this revulsion or repulsion or rejection of anything in you, then you'll find all these symptoms suddenly fade away. They may not go away instantly because the habit is lodged in the biology, but the intensity will diminish. I had an interesting example of a young boy who developed an autoimmune disease at the age of 8, and they had to pump him with steroids all the way through 15. And one day it happened this way. He was having tensions with his parents, and suddenly the symptoms rushed up. And they came running to him and they were giving him all the affection that it needed. And he said, "Now I know how to control you." You realize what was happening somewhere deep inside. This was the mechanism by which he was drawing attention to himself and getting the love and affection which otherwise he felt lacking. And when he was a little older, I sat with him once and I explained to him what was happening internally in these terms. And he said, "I understand what you're saying." And for a while at least, I lost touch with him afterwards, but for a while at least all his symptoms had begun to diminish. But somewhere eventually something kicks in and says, "But where's my self-importance? If suddenly I don't have this incurable disease, people won't look at me with the same importance anymore." And you call it back, you call back the symptoms because something enjoys. So you have to be very careful in assessing where the knot exists psychologically and just to solve all that. I am who I am in terms of my innate value, not because people give attention. And you have to neutralize that. So if you look at it psychologically, there is a cure. Physically, you cannot cure because the source is in the psychology. And whatever medicines you give, they work for a while and then the symptoms somehow overcome. They become immune to the medicine itself. And then whenever you have a disease like that, the source is psychological. And the correction is needed there. The question is, when there is a descent of energy from above, the peace settling from above, that's much more strong and everything else now seems not worth doing, right? Or you can't do at all. From a spiritual perspective, to draw energy from above is the best. It is the purest, most nourishing, most uplifting. If somewhere on a physical level you lack a certain grade of energy and it appears as a problem, then you may need to correct it by the means such as food, correction in food, or drawing from the universal vitality on that level. And then where necessary you may make that effort. But if you have to develop the skill of working with people, and especially with large numbers of people, you will have to perforce develop the capacity to connect horizontally with energies. If you're working alone, it doesn't matter. So it's a decision you'll have to make. If you need it, then you'll have to consciously open out and try to feel energies in people, in situations, and respond appropriately. You'll have to learn that skill, but keep in mind, you'll draw nourishment from above, and then from there you may exercise that energy horizontally to influence the circumstances or people. So the peace is the foundation. If you have established in yourself this energy of peace, and the consciousness of peace, especially in your nerves, then you can wield vital energy much more easily, more stably, and more widely, because your foundation is now more solid. That's why the peace is always the foundation. Develop that first.
Quick question. When I listen to all this, the human race is here, the animal race is there. Where are we right now?
It's a good question. The animal race itself is in a range, okay? And the human race is just on the crust, on top. We're not too different from animals, other than our power of thought and speech. Most of our instincts are still repetitions of the animal instincts. Except where, through culturing, through self-cultivation, we have made an effort to rise above. And this is what we call civilization. It's only when we culture ourselves and make an effort to rise above our instinctive behavior, to bring higher values of first rationality and perhaps beyond to ideals, that we become more human and less animal. And at least the attempt was there. For a while now it seems that attempt has been forgotten and people are happy to wallow in their instinctive tendencies because I want to do my thing. And what's my thing? The impulse which drives me at this moment. I want to be free from you, which means what? I want to be able to do what I feel like doing right now. In other words, become a slave of my impulse of the moment. Okay, maybe it's a passage you have to pass through, but it's a dangerous passage still. So the sooner we recognize that, yes, I need to do my thing, but not my impulsive thing, but my true thing, for which I must make an effort to find, a discipline I must pass through to realize my own deeper freedom, then we will come through to something greater. But this is the passage where you could go either way. And that's why this text is so important. The tapasya, the concentrated effort of self-cultivation, is like outlined here as a framework.